Okay. Well, welcome to the Indigenous Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today I have Maria Lopez Rosas with me. She is with Illumen Capital, and we're going to talk about their organization and what they are doing to support Native and other diverse communities of entrepreneurs and innovators. So, before we get started, or as we get started, if you could just introduce yourself, Maria, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Great. Discush Pelatu. My name is Maria Lopez Rosas. I am originally from a Oaxacan community in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, Oaxaca, Mexico, and currently live in Oakland, California. I am currently a portfolio associate for Illumen Capital, and um, it has been very life-changing work to be an asset allocator for a fund of funds. And I think my uh, life has not really prepared me to go into venture, but no one's path breaking into venture has looked very linear. So after graduating from Stanford, I went into this asset allocation fund, and it has been a very learning experience since, but a lot of very proud work.
And you guys are based in California, correct? Or
Yes, we
what
have,
part?
we have an office in Oakland, and we also just recently opened an office in New York as we expanded our team. So we're very excited about that.
So what exactly is asset allocation? That's what Illumin Capital does. So what is that?
Illumin is a fund of funds, so we invest in other venture funds. We typically invest in venture funds that are committed to working in impact or working with diverse communities. And when it comes to asset allocation, it just means we are taking capital that our LPs have invested into us and investing that capital into some of the most, outstanding funds that we see that are thesis aligned and are committed to doing the work and are also committed to our bias reduction curriculum and, doing this bias reduction work in partnership with us. So.
So when Simi and Illumin Capital originally reached out to me, just wanting to learn more about the podcast, you guys mentioned that you do work with Native-owned businesses, and as you mentioned, like diverse serving venture capital firms. So, what does that look like? How do you support the venture capital firms, but then also like what kind of work are you doing with Native-owned businesses?
We mostly invest at the fund level. So when we deploy capital to venture funds, they deploy capital to entrepreneurs. And our goal is to diversify the portfolio of our venture funds as much as possible, as we fundamentally believe that when you are investing in diverse communities, those that are overlooked, underrepresented, and undercapitalized, you are, taking the alpha into your investments. And what I mean by that is that you're really looking to, get a different way into, returning capital, and you're not just investing into, some amazing entrepreneurs, but you're also financially, you're going to get the financial returns for these are opportunities that are typically missed, but are solving some really, great problems and that are currently in the world. So our bias reduction curriculum focuses on coaching fund managers to help them find diverse communities and help them ensure that capital is not being left at the table, but we are investing in Black, Brown, Indigenous, Latino, Asian American, any communities that are typically under-resourced and undercapitalized and oftentimes overlooked, we are ensuring that our fund managers are finding these opportunities. And so a lot of our coaching focuses on helping our fund managers connect with these communities. And so we have partnerships with a lot of different accelerators that are seeing a lot of Indigenous entrepreneurs. And I think there's a lot of intersectionality in the work. So we're not just funding the Latino community, but we're funding the Indigenous Latino community, or Black and Indigenous, or Black and Latino. And we understand that there are capital gaps currently in the venture capital world. I believe less than 1% of capital goes towards Black entrepreneurs, and less than 0.004% goes to Indigenous entrepreneurs. And so how do we ensure that capital is reaching the appropriate hands when it comes to ensuring that, not only are we funding a diverse community, but we're also ensuring that these opportunities are not overlooked. And so a lot of our coaching focuses on creating these pipelines, or not creating, but supporting these pipelines for our fund managers, ensuring that they have access to our networks. Stanford LBON is a good example, where Stanford has an accelerator that ensures that Indigenous or Latino entrepreneurs are funded, but they have found that there is actually a lot of Latino Indigenous entrepreneurs that are going through their curriculum as well, and they are piloting how do we get these entrepreneurs that go through this accelerator that are having some great ideas and are getting the returns, our capital, that they're capitalized generally, or a lot of these entrepreneurs are already making money within their company. And, how do we find the next investors that are going to believe in the stories that they are telling? A lot of times we believe that these investments are not made because of racial biases. And so Stanford Spark, in conjunction with Illumen Capital, published a paper in 2018 that focused on racial biases. And it talks about how there are racial biases when it comes to asset allocation, and how Black fund managers in particular are, the more successful they are, the least likely they are to get funded. And so how do we eliminate these racial biases for Black fund managers, but also extend these interventions to reduce biases to all communities and ensure that there are as least racial biases possible. Like we reduce these racial biases as much as possible for all investors that are looking to do the work and looking to diversify their portfolio and looking to, return capital. So that's a little bit on Illumen's bias reduction curriculum, and some partnerships with Stanford LBON, for instance, that is committed to doing the work. And most recently as well, I was with the Rematriating Economies Apprenticeship. I am one of their first wave graduates, and Illumen was very, very thrilled to see that this next generation of Indigenous women entrepreneurs, or not entrepreneurs, but fund managers, are, being supported and uplifted through this apprenticeship, and are going to be making their way into the next, generation of fund managers. And so we're super excited about that. And Illumen wants to continue supporting the next generation of women entrepreneur or women fund managers. And so we believe that at the fund manager level, it starts, or it can be a way to support capitalizing entrepreneurs. So the more representation we have, the more we have, the more we are supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs. I think a lot of studies have shown how, when for instance, Black fund managers are present, they're more likely to fund Black entrepreneurs. And so when women are as fund managers, they're more likely to fund other women. And so how can we get the most diversified investors to fund the most diversified entrepreneurs? So that's a little bit on that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm going to make sure to link that Stanford and Illumen paper that you mentioned to the description, as well as the Rumi Trading Economies apprenticeship. That way, people listening, if they want to learn more, they can just go to those links. But something that I was wondering as you were sharing was what does it look like if a venture firm wants to work with Illumin, or if they see that there's a need that maybe they're not making the most diverse um, investments, or maybe like they see that there's areas for improvement within their firm. Do you only work with venture funds that are already doing that type of work, or if there's venture funds that maybe aren't really focused on social impact investing or investing in like diverse communities, are you able and willing to work with those firms to kind of help them do that? What does that look like? I guess what's your process if there's an organization that wants to work with you?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I feel like we are very bullish on funds that want to work, want to do this work in general. I think funds that want to diversify their portfolio, that want to diversify their team and know that they want to commit to doing the bias reduction work. I mean, this is when an asset allocator invests in a venture fund, it is a 10-year long process. So we are making a 10-year partnership that we hope that at the end of this fund life cycle, which is 10 years, we're hoping you can reach the goals of diversifying a portfolio, diversifying a team, or having more measuring out impact metrics, for instance, and measuring out how are you telling the story of impact for your fund in particular. And this can be within climate, sustainability, health, wellness, financial inclusion, and education. And so we're pretty open to funds that are that may not have all of the things falling into the right place at the moment, but we understand how hard it is to raise a fund. And so we are thought partners to support reaching these goals, to support within the partnership. We have seen funds that, have never published an impact report, but, after, working with Illumen have, managed to tell their story of how they're supporting, diverse entrepreneurs and how they are supporting more on ESG, for instance, or climate, or are having more of an outcomes-based impact perspective. So we help tell these stories. I think as Indigenous folks, oftentimes I think about how do we, story tell. I think Indigenous communities have a beautiful way of telling their own stories for generations and, ensuring that none of those stories are lost. And so as an investor, I try to think about how do we tell the stories of fund managers that are, are intentional about wanting to do this work and are intentional about sharing their resources and creating a table where they can capitalize those that haven't had the opportunity to be capitalized yet. And so those are the investors that I feel like Illumin is most bullish about. You don't have to fit all of the right buckets right now, but should be committed to doing the work. And so we have seen, for instance, funds that have had a portfolio that wasn't as diverse, but are committed more on the impact side. So we help them, find more diverse entrepreneurs. How do we, link you up with these pipelines? And usually these funds are very kind to have referrals as well for like the entrepreneurs that we meet and ensure that they are taking the time to talk to them and ensuring that they're moving through that process. So it's a little bit on the both ends. And then one other thought that I was thinking about was how, as a fund of funds, we have access to all these amazing funds, and even funds that we do not invest into just because it's not the right time. We can share deal source with them on different entrepreneurs that we find. I think I'm especially bullish on sharing Latinx and Indigenous entrepreneurs that I meet because their stories just sound so similar. And how do I connect them to different fund managers that are also doing this work and can listen to the stories and understand the stories? I think a lot of times investors simply don't invest because they don't understand the story. It's just so far from their own world that they don't get it. And so how can we ensure that there is that connection where the stories that are being told are heard, and the capital just comes later? So that's a little bit on that. And then yeah, as I mentioned, Illumen Capital doesn't see the work solely to be done from diverse fund managers. We believe everybody should be committed to doing this work to eliminate a lot of the remnants of white supremacy and ensure that it's not just the labor of diverse fund managers to capitalize diverse entrepreneurs, but it is everyone's labor to ensure that we are uplifting and supporting overlooked and underrepresented entrepreneurs. We believe that there are opportunities that are missed when we are not supporting diverse entrepreneurs. And we understand that every fund has a different mandate, but how can we review our own mandates to ensure that there are no biases in there and ensure that we are capitalizing those that we have committed to? But yeah, it makes financial sense, and it also makes more of the impact sense. So how do we, if you have the most options as possible, you are more likely to have a better chance of finding your next fund returner. So we're very excited about that front.
Um, what are some like success stories that you can share of instances where Illumen Capital has come in and worked with a venture fund, and then like a business has been invested in and then been successful? Um, I guess an instance where maybe the opportunity would have been missed if Illumin Capital hadn't come in, done the like prep work and the biassy training and worked with the venture fund, and then a company was invested in and like succeeded. Can you share like a success story or two with us?
Yeah. I think there is a lot. So it trickles down, I think, from fund to entrepreneur to community. Ultimately, we want the entrepreneurs that we are investing in through our fund managers to be supporting the communities that are in the most need of capital in some sort of way. So it's not that the entrepreneur is, giving capital, but it's that they're solving a problem for under-resourced entrepreneurs or communities, I mean. And so one of them is more focused. So there's a lot of AI buzz right now, so everyone's super excited about AI. And so we had a fund that committed to a diverse team of entrepreneurs, and they actually they have an AI platform that focuses on finding images and labeling images. So it takes a long time to label images. And this application has been really focusing on ensuring that there is diversity in the images that are presented. Like, we are not just, when we think, for instance, of an oven, we can't just have like the US's modern oven. There are different kinds of ovens. Indigenous communities, like my community, we have an oven underground. We don't have a traditional oven. So how do we ensure that we are creating the visual images that are representative of every community that is present. I think most importantly for Indigenous communities, where our stories, our ways of knowing, our presence is invisible for the general, textbooks, for the stories that are told, the narratives that are told. And so how do we ensure that native ovens are, present? And it's a microcosm of an example, but it creates a world where we contribute to the narrative where Indigenous communities are invisible. And so they're doing just some fantastic work on having a breadth of images that are representative of communities. They have, images from Indigenous communities all over the world, within Latin America, within, the New Zealand Indigenous communities. And they talked about how Indigenous communities in Alaska, for instance, have like their different, ovens, or it's not just about ovens, it's about ways of knowing. And so how do we ensure that AI is capturing these ways of knowing, and ensuring that they are not lost when we are creating new machine learning models that are typically fed, like it's good robots being fed bad data. And so how do we ensure that we have good data that is representative, that tells the stories that history books wanted to erase so badly, but communities continue to be resilient and present these stories anyway. So I think they're doing fantastic work on, the AI front, and it's a diverse team, and they are first generation entrepreneurs, and it's a Black and Latino led team, but they are telling the stories of Indigenous communities, which I felt was so close to home, where we are storytelling and we are ensuring that our community's ways of knowing lives on. And, like my community's language, the Zapotec language, is actually endangered. So we are not learning. We're not teaching our children fast enough as we are losing our elders. And so when applications like that are taking our stories and are making sure it lives somewhere and making sure that other communities know that it is visible, it just felt very meaningful to me that there was success on that front.
And are you able to say what the fund was called or what the company's name is?
Yeah, so not the fund, but the company. So it's called Coactive AI. They are doing some fantastic work, and the founder has just an amazing story. He's a Black founder, partnered with a Latino founder, and they are both, first generation entrepreneurs, but also they are these amazing PhD graduates that have this amazing knowledge. I believe one of the founders, he's mentioned he was one of three PhD graduates that was Latino, but with throughout like his whole tenure of 7 years from MIT. And so it is a lot of work that needs to be done for ensuring that, diverse entrepreneurs are supported throughout their, research process, throughout like all the phases of the pipeline, from getting from the idea to getting capitalized. But ultimately, it takes a village, to support all the diverse entrepreneurs. So I felt that story was very close to home.
Well, I like that it's two different like types of diverse funders or diverse founders working together to then um serve like the Indigenous community and their stories. Because a lot of times, sometimes I see like more silos being made versus just like integrating, literally making it more diverse, instead of just like siloing off into our different groups, um, creating that space where like truly diverse funders and founders and people can come together and work together to create something. So
Yeah, yeah. There's
thanks
a
for,
lot of
oh, I was just gonna say thanks for sharing that story.
yeah, there's a lot of intersectionality that needs to happen to ensure that we are um, supporting Indigenous communities. It is not just the labor of Indigenous communities to, fix what was done throughout generations. It is the labor of everybody. It is everyone's labor to eliminate, the remnants of white supremacy, the existing nature, and ensure that we are supporting intersectionally through like for every community. If we see something that it, is a story that needs to be told. How are we being, uh, you know, vessels to tell this next story? And even if it is a story that is so different, how do we ensure that it continues to live on? I think AI and a lot of the new tech is their job is to story tell. So how do we ensure that they are telling the right stories?
Awesome. I think that's really cool. And it's cool to see like Illumen Capital playing a role in that kind of greater picture, I guess you could say. You mentioned so you guys work with like venture funds, but you also mentioned working with accelerator programs to an extent. What does that look like? Is it different than working with venture funds? Like, how do you support accelerators?
Yeah, for accelerators, we try to be present as a fund of funds to talk to entrepreneurs and get to know them and share the information from those entrepreneurs to our fund managers. So specifically for diverse accelerators, we want to ensure that we are supporting them. For instance, in Tulsa, I really love Tulsa. They're building the next Black Wall Street, and there's a lot of Indigenous communities in Oklahoma, as you may know, but they have a really great hub for entrepreneurship that is being funded, and I try to make my way out every year to go to their pitch competitions. They have a women's pitch competition where they support in or like diverse women. They can be Black, Indigenous, Latino, etc. But they're supporting women that are traditionally undercapitalized, but they are ensuring that the next great ideas are funded throughout this pitch competition. I try to go and show up and ensure that all the entrepreneurs that are present are connected with somebody that may be in alignment with our network of funds or maybe in alignment with somebody that we may know. I think there is power in having accessible networks, and ensuring that that power is shared for communities is something that drives impact. And so through the accelerator end, I think as investors we should think about how can we support the next entrepreneurs, even if we're not directly investing in them. How do we share our networks to ensure that they are connected to the right people? And we never know, they might be creating the next big thing, and ensure that they are uh, returning the next fund. We never know.
So you serve as like a connector for those entrepreneurs in the accelerator programs to then hopefully connect them to the right capital or funder.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
We want to
Okay.
make sure that we're connecting folks as much as possible, and every investor that has the power of networks, I think there's only enough time for people to connect with everybody, but it's about intentionality, right? So another one is the Stanford Elbon one. We try to attend their Latino entrepreneurship nights that they hold every quarter. To ensure that we are meeting all the amazing entrepreneurs, and we are ensuring that capital is being shared with them. And even if it takes a year for them to find capital, at least that connection was made. And so we ideally, it doesn't take a year, but we want to ensure that they are having all of their choices of different capital. And we know folks are committed to this work, and so they're the best folks to be connected to.
So you guys do work throughout the US. Have you been able to do any work in New Mexico yet? And if not, are you looking to like kind of what is your footprint on New Mexico currently?
Yeah, so I am familiar with the New Mexico Community Capital. I know they're doing exemplary work, but we haven't, had as much exposure to New Mexico yet. I think as Illumen continues to grow, we're currently within our Fund 2 going into Fund 3 life cycle. So we're very, very excited to be growing, and we want to ensure we reach all facets of the world. So always open to getting to know different areas.
And you mentioned you participated in rematriating economies, which is with Vanessa Roanhorse Consulting and Native Women Lead. So that's also New Mexico. They're with us in the Lobo Rainforest. They're our neighbors. So you guys are
Awesome.
slowly starting to, I guess, start having a presence here. And I think through UNM Rainforest Innovations, we might be able to kind of help expand that footprint if you guys are interested. At least through like introductions and like inviting you to different events and whatnot, virtual events. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to learn more, and always want to get to know more spaces that are supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs and just being the
mhm,
next hubs and accelerators, et cetera. And so any space like that is, something that is thesis aligned.
mhm. Do you guys have any like strategic partners or people who you've worked with that have like been really important in the work that you've done that you would like to just mention or share about while we're on here?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I can talk forever about the Rematriating Economies apprenticeship and the work that Vanessa Rowan Horse is doing. I think she speaks to the commitment that she is making to create the next wave of fund managers, of women fund managers, and those that are, committed to the work of capitalizing the next entrepreneurs. And truly, she's just incredible at the work that she's doing, and how she speaks to it as well. And then, I think the Stanford partnership, I feel like there's so many partnerships. There's, VC Familia, there's Stanford, the LBAN. There's a lot of different hubs that are doing this work and are committed to doing this work. And I believe, like each state, has their own, accelerator network, or just, like in Tulsa, there's the Build in Tulsa, and there's um, a lot of the capital that is going towards diverse entrepreneurs. So they're doing the work. And something that I learned in Tulsa was that at every state has their own story, and every state has their own version of Black Wall Street. So there's like a history there of building Wall Street, and what does Wall Street look like when it is diversified? What does Wall Street look like when it is Black? And what does Wall Street look like when it is Indigenous? And so every state has their own story, and so it's up to us to decide how we tell that story. And yeah, there's truly not there's too many partners to mention.
Can you talk a little bit more about your partnership with Stanford? Just because I personally would like to learn more about how you guys have worked with them since we are with the University of New Mexico. Like, what does that partnership like with the university look like?
Yeah. So the founder of Illumen Capital, Darren Dodson, he is um, he teaches course of entrepreneurship at Stanford, GSB, but a lot of our partnership has originally been established within the research. So we believe the power is in the data, and ensuring that stories are told through the data are something that cannot be debunked. So when we are pitching to somebody the story that biases are present, it can be hard to understand that biases are present when they are nebulous. So how do we ensure that we are, having communities believe that biases are present? Well, we have the data. You cannot refute the data that is present. And so we want to ensure that we partner with like the best folks that are committed to doing this data. So Stanford Spark has published data before on what are they called, police stops, and how Black individuals are more likely to be pulled over than white individuals. And so how do we ensure that we intervene that? And they created an intervention where when you make a stop, the policeman has to ask themselves, like, why am I making this stop? And write down, and it takes like those 15 seconds that it takes for them to review why they made that stop actually makes them um, a lot of times makes them not move forward with the stop. And so I did a terrible job of explaining that study, but it's actually really fascinating in intervening a lot of the present racial biases and ensuring that the work that we are doing is intentional and not just because we are conditioned like that from society, from family, from anything like that. And so through the partnerships that show the research is something that we want to ensure that we contribute to, that we elevate as well. So Stanford Albon, for instance, has some amazing research on how on the state of Latino entrepreneurship, and they most recently showed that Latina women are the least likely to get loans or like acceptance for loans. There's a present racial bias that Latina women are just not being accepted to receive these loans, even when their next idea is, equally as profitable as anybody else's. And, how do we ensure that we are meeting these capital gaps when the banks are not, when, the different existing networks that entrepreneurs would typically lean on are failing. And so that's so it's something that we want to ensure that we continue to tell the stories of data and are contributing to that work by, elevating that work, ensuring our partners know if that work is existing. And we want to be data backed and research backed into everything that we do. All of our, racial bias curriculum or bias reduction curriculum is foundational or has a lot of data that is foundational to the interventions that we create for our fund managers. So we want to ensure that all of the data that we know exists around these topics is being presented, and our fund managers are also not left disillusioned that this is just something we can't change, but hey, there is actually data that shows that we can support diverse entrepreneurs through this other way, or anything like that. So we want to show the good data as well. But yeah, that's a little bit on it.
So kind of partnering with the research to back what some people may say are like subjective stories of biases, but and backing that up with objective data and research is what
Right.
it sounds like.
Yeah. And a lot of it is storytelling, as we mentioned, that telling the stories of the fund managers and then supporting that with how, Black fund managers are least likely to get funded the more successful that they are. And so how do we ensure that these stories are told to our wider community, and ensure that we tell them like this is the way in which we are approaching this issue? And we can't tackle all issues at once, but we want to ensure that the issues that are on thesis are being tackled, and we are supporting in ways in which we can close these capital gaps.
So one last question that I have for you, it's less to do with Illumen Capital and just kind of more personal. Because you mentioned when we met before we came on the podcast, like you're not Native American, but you are indigenous to Mexico. I think a lot of people don't understand like how many indigenous peoples exist, like not just in the US, but throughout the world. So I'm wondering if you can just kind of share your own experience as a Latina, but also like an indigenous person, and just kind of share about your community and where you come from. And I'm curious to hear you speak a little bit about your own story.
Yeah, yeah, that's so wonderful that you ask. I feel like a lot of visibility is happening, but yeah. So I am indigenous to Oaxaca, Mexico. In Oaxaca, we have around 11 different indigenous communities with different dialects, and there's different blending of those dialects. We have, for instance, the Mixtec, the Wabe community, and I come from a community called the Zapotecs. So the Zapotecs, we have our own language, the Zapotec language, and also known as Dijaza, and we are the Biniza people. We come from the skies. And so as indigenous people, oftentimes because we are in our communities, we tend to have a more different identity than just being Mexican or just being Latino. We have our ways of knowing that are different than the traditional, Latino people that are in the city. And there are indigenous communities all over Mexico, within Yucatan, within Guerrero, within many, many different states, and all the states have, some sort of indigenous community there, and it's more about the visibility. And they exist all over Latin America, within El Salvador, within, Brazil. I would think Brazil has the most breadth of diverse indigenous communities, and Bolivia as well. Bolivia is doing a really amazing work of having the indigenous communities be more present in their day-to-day life, and really uplifting. I think they had the first indigenous woman that was a news anchor, and I thought that was really fascinating. And we're seeing a lot of really great work as well in New Zealand with the Maori people, and how they had one indigenous young woman being elected to their government boards, and she had just an amazing, singing ritual where she uplifted her community and had a warrior cry, and it was just fascinating. But yeah, a lot of the indigenous communities worldwide are still present. Still, when we talk a lot about indigenous communities in from Latino communities, we often think that, oh, it was something from the past, and it was something that we should remember. But we're very much alive and very much visible and very much present and here, and are looking to continue sharing our knowledge or ways of knowing and language to the next generation of you know that of indigenous kids. And so that's something that my community is working a lot on. And my dad in particular, he didn't teach me the language because there was a lot of shame in learning the Zapotec language. And it is devastating to understand that it could potentially die with me, because my dad is, he's a thinker and knower, and he's most recently trying to amend this by writing in our dialect. And so I'm so proud of him for being a leader in a lot of the translating services, because it's a dialect, it's not written. And so how do we ensure that this it's not just told within stories, but it is present in, different files. And now we have technology to share these files all over the world. And so we have found even indigenous communities from, or indigenous people from my community in Tulsa, so I was fascinated that, and not only did I make it all the way over there, they also made it all the way here. And so there is a lot of identities from being, Indigenous and also being immigrant to the U.S. There is a lot of identity to carry, and I'm proud of every identity that I carry. Not just that, but I am a sister, I am a daughter to a matriarch, and my mom didn't accomplish all the things that she dreamed to do because of opportunity. We had to migrate to the United States, but um, I get to, live these dreams that she had of being a capital asset allocator to many different communities and speak in many different places and have my language be visible in all the spaces that I enter and have my identity be visible as well. And so when entering, the fund manager space, I think prior to the rematriating economies apprenticeship, there's only a handful of women, of Indigenous women that are doing the work. And now even more and more women. And it's not just about representation, but ensuring that communities know that this work is something that they can do. A lot of Indigenous women are already, fund managers within their own community, handling, their communities' budgets, tribal budgets, and how can we translate this work into being an asset allocator for foundations, for institutions, and pension funds, and ensuring that this that it is representative of the communities that they are serving. And so, and of course, ensuring that diverse entrepreneurs are capitalized. So it takes a lot of trickling down, but there are many different facets that can be tackled, like the work that Vanessa is doing, but there are many different solutions to it that we can think creatively to solve. So there are many generations for this to happen, but I'm excited for what's to come.
Well, thank you for sharing, I mean, your role with Illumen Capital with us, but also sharing a little bit about yourself and your personal journey and your Indigenous ways of knowing and how you're taking them and implementing them into the work that you're doing. I think it's important to have people like you in this venture capital fund asset allocation space. So thank you. And if people listening want to get in contact with you, how can they reach out to you or to Lumen Capital to connect further?
Yeah, so for funds that are raising capital, we have on our website link where you can submit your next proposal. So any funds that are looking for their next, round or investment, we try to keep our inboxes open for anybody. And then you can just contact me through my email, or LinkedIn is also great, which I can share with you. So yeah, I try to be as open as possible to anybody that is, committed to doing this work, and in that can be even a thought partnership, a friend, anything like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your story. I really appreciate it. And I really hope that this is the first of like future conversations that we'll have to just continue the work that you guys are doing to uplift not just Indigenous founders, but diverse founders throughout the US. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.